Should be up soon, guys. Let's check. I'm looking at X right now. See if we're on live on X yet. Yeah, that's not where I want to go. This is where I want to go. I think we're live everywhere. We're live on X. And, well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Just double checking that everything's working right before we get started. But my name is David.
I'm Jeff.
And this is the Jeff and Jeff podcast. We're going to try something a little bit different tonight.
Well, first of all, it's tonight, not in the morning, so.
Yeah, well, that's true. But it is Good Friday, so. Looks like we are live on X and YouTube. Well, we're waiting for a Rumble for some reason. Let me see if it's just wrong and we're live there too. Let's see.
So we decided to do it tonight because we got too much stuff going on tomorrow.
That is true. But what is tonight? And what are we going to talk about? Why don't you intro us while I try to figure this out?
So we decided to change tacks a bit tonight because it is Good Friday. So we're going to talk about what happened on Good Friday.
Yes, we are live on Rumble. Sorry. Yeah, it's Good Friday. For those who celebrate, it is a Good Friday.
And even for those who don't, they just don't realize that they benefit from it as well.
That's true. They don't realize that at all. A lot of people don't. So why is it a Good Friday? Is there anything good about it, actually?
Well, we get off work.
Well, some of us do.
Some of us.
I mean, my boss was mean and kept me here in the office all day.
That's true. That's true. He happens to be his own boss, but that's beside the point. So why is it called Good Friday? It should be called, if we listened and see what happened to Jesus on Friday, it's not really good what happened to him.
Yeah.
We start with that.
Well, let's talk about what happened.
Yeah. He was...
So if you don't know anything about... Well, so Jesus is the foundation of Christianity. A lot of people don't really... what's the word? Fully understand that. But it is. And he, during his life on earth, claimed to be God. But what happened on Good Friday? What was bad about Good Friday?
Well, first of all, it was accumulated in him being drug to the cross.
It did.
And crucified. And dying on Good Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one who was called Jesus, the Messiah, ended up dying on Good Friday. So how is that good news? And what happened to him right before he died is also pretty horrific. So what did he do? He went and prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Well, let's start off on Thursday.
Okay.
What happened on Thursday? So Jesus and his disciples, after having a great meal and time with their friends, one of them happened to be Lazarus, the guy who he raised from the dead, they decided to go into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, because that's traditionally what the Jews did, right? Is they went to Jerusalem every year. The ones that could afford it, right? Not everyone could afford to pick up their family and go to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, but a lot of people did, so it was packed out. It was a lot of people there. So Jesus shows up, and he does a bunch of weird things, and we can get into those later if we want, but he rides in on a colt of a donkey, and what do all the people do?
They throw their cloaks down, they throw palm branches down, they wave palm branches, and they yell at him, Hosanna.
Why is that significant?
Well, two things. Why is it significant that he came on a donkey? If a king would come on a horse, he was coming for war.
Mm-hmm.
If a king came on a donkey, he was coming with peace.
Yep, coming in peace. So it was a historically significant thing for him to do, is to ride in on a donkey, because, like you said, if he'd done it other ways, it could have been seen as him coming in as a conqueror, and he didn't want to be seen that way at all.
And the people recognized him from the things that he had done already, and the miracles, and his reputation, and Hosanna. In the best, one of the simplest ways to say what Hosanna means is, God save us.
Yeah.
Come save us. And so they were singing and yelling at Jesus
To save them.
So he comes in, and that's his how he enters into Jerusalem.
Yeah, and to give a little bit more historical context, the Jews they still had their Jerusalem and cities and stuff, and they still were allowed to live there, but they were under the rule of Rome, and they deplored Rome. They hated it. The Romans didn't treat them great, but they treated them good enough so that they wouldn't revolt, but they hated their situation. And so the Jewish people wanted someone to liberate them from the Roman authority.
And it had been prophesied that there would be the Messiah.
Yep.
Who would come, and one of the things he would do was liberate them from their oppressors. They didn't mention the Romans in name.
No.
But it just said those who oppressed them.
Yes.
And so they're looking for this Messiah to come. And of course, they wanted to be liberated from the Romans.
Yep. So he comes in riding on his colt, and he sits down with his disciples at Passover, which was also a crazy thing, because he's like, hey guys, go into town, and this one random person's going to be like, hey, yeah, you guys can come over and have Passover at our house. But it happened that way. And so him and his crew of 12 plus, because I'm sure there were additional people as well, hang out at this random person's house and do Passover. Now, do you want to tell them what Passover represents?
It's the Passover of the firstborn in Egypt.
Yep.
So when God said to the Israelites that were living in Egypt in slavery, when Moses was like, this is the last thing we're going to do, is your firstborn are all going to be killed.
Yep.
And the simple way around it was you sacrificed a unblemished lamb.
Yep.
You took its blood and you painted it on the sides of the door and on the top of the door, and the angel of death would pass over that household. And there was a specific things they were supposed to eat and everything else. And so the celebration of the Passover is a remembrance of the day that God passed over the firstborn of the Hebrews.
Yep. So it was a very significant event for the Hebrews, because that's when they left Egypt. It was a huge thing. They plundered Egypt when they left Egypt. They took all the gold and stuff because the Egyptians wanted them gone so badly.
Because all their firstborn had just died.
Yeah. And so what does Jesus do? Not only does he celebrate a traditional Jewish holiday with his disciples, but he changes it and makes it significant. They don't know why, but this is the time when Jesus, well, first off, Judas runs off, and then Jesus breaks bread and says, let me see if I find that verse. You can go ahead.
This is where we get what we would call communion, or the first sacrament. But this is what we would say that this took place, where he took bread, he broke it, and he said, this is my body, which is a weird thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Gave it to the disciples, and they all tore a piece, eat it. And then he took a cup of wine and said, this is my blood, and then drink it, which is just even more weird. And so, anyhow, I think, yeah, and so.
And that's found in Luke 19 through 23, looks like.
Yeah, and
So that's where we get the communion
Yeah.
from, and
We
why
celebrate
we
communion.
don't celebrate Passover, we celebrate communion.
Correct.
I think that's significant to point out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a massive change. And when the when the disciples were doing that, they're not like, "Oh, this makes sense. We know exactly what this is." They're looking at Jesus like, "What is wrong with this guy?
Exactly. What is going on?
What is he doing?
Well, he'd done a lot
Sure,
of
I'll eat the bread. Fine, I'm hungry."
Well, he'd done a lot of things that were outside of their boxes
Well, yeah,
in his
almost,
entire ministry. So this has got to be one of the strangest things that he did.
Yes.
And they didn't understand at all.
No, not at all.
And I don't know if we totally understand it yet, but we do understand the sacrifice. But
We understand a bit of it
Yeah.
better than they did. And it's kind of funny because his disciples almost never understood his parables and stuff. There's several times where he's talking directly to the Pharisees, and they get what he's saying, the analogy he's making, and his disciples are like, "What is going on? What is he talking about?"
that's why they tried to kill him, because they
Exactly.
understood what he was saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But his disciples didn't. They had no idea most of the time. And then they looked back, as you can tell from the writing, and put the pieces together.
Yes.
And so this is significant because this is before he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane with his troop -1. So he's going there, and he is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. And this is something a little bit weird that there's some controversy, I'm sure, in some circles about, where Jesus asks God the Father to take the cup from him. So is he talking to himself?
If it's his will.
If it's his will to take the cup from him, meaning if he doesn't have to die, then then he doesn't have to die.
Yeah, because he understood what was going on. I don't think it is, because if we believe the Trinity,
Yes.
and the Trinity is not, the word's not used in the Bible, but it's taught everywhere that there are three separate persons, and they make one God, and
Yeah.
it's somehow that's how it works. And I don't know. And they've been in communion, and they've been in fellowship from before creation.
Yep.
And they'll be in communion and fellowship after everything disappears.
Yes.
And so don't understand, but the Bible clearly teaches that.
Well, the one thing I want to point out is you would hope, and this is just my naive thinking, you would hope that if there is a God, he would be a God, meaning he would be above and beyond your full understanding.
Because he's not much of a God if I can understand him.
Correct.
He's a human.
So,
yeah.
To me, it adds validity to the aspect of, yes, he is God.
Right. Because I'm a finite being. I have a beginning, and this body will have an end.
Yes.
And I can't understand infinite.
Me neither.
And so that's the difference. All right, so back to this. So he goes to the garden. So you got to understand prep work a little bit before this. They walked to Jerusalem. So they probably would have walked 10, 12, 15 miles that day.
Yeah.
They came in, it was the afternoon, they got to rest and eat. And then instead of going to sleep, he takes everybody to the garden.
So they've had a long, tiring day.
They've had a long
already.
day. Yes. And they
And they
just ate.
Yeah, they just ate. So what happens when you had a long, tiring day and you just ate?
And you go and get comfortable somewhere.
You might get sleepy.
Just might.
Yeah, so he took what three disciples did he take with him to pray? It's this one. Nope.
No, it'd be before that.
Before this?
Yeah.
No.
No, I can't see what you're doing.
Let me skip over here. Do-do-do. Last Supper, blah, blah, blah. Not blah, 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 blah. All right. Who did he take? It doesn't say in this one either. I have to find the right version. I think it was Peter, James, and John, wasn't it?
I don't remember off the top of my head either. But it doesn't matter. He took some of his disciples with him. They went to pray, and what happened? They fell asleep.
Yep.
Because guess what?
They were tired.
They were tired.
They were very tired.
Yep.
But he was praying, talking to God, and just agonizing over what he knew he had to do.
And what was coming.
And what was coming. And so after that, after waking up his disciples,
praying again, them falling asleep again. So they did it twice.
Who shows up?
Judas.
So when he left the Passover dinner, he went straight to the Sanhedrin and got paid 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus.
To point him out. That's all he was doing. He said, I can take the soldiers to him, and I'll point him out who he is. Because you got to remember, Jerusalem's packed.
Yes.
And so there's lots of people. So he said, I will point him out to you. And so he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him a kiss on the cheek. And so he approaches Jesus, and Jesus says, hey, you're going to betray the Son of Man with a kiss. Now, just an interesting side note.
I just love, he's the God of the universe. He knows everything that's going on. So he makes questioning statements. They're not really questions.
Correct.
They're convictions. He's looking at him saying, I know exactly what you're doing. I know why you're here. But do you?
And how uncomfortable would that be?
Very, very much so. Very much so. So this is the start of Good Friday.
Correct.
This is kind of where it starts from. So this interesting little scuffle happens. One of the disciples cuts off the ear of a servant. Jesus heals the servant and then gets after the chief priests and officers. Like, this is Luke 22:52. Am I leading a rebellion that you come with me with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns.
Basically, you're not going to come out in public and get me.
Yep. He rebukes them.
Knows what's going to happen. And
Correct.
So you're going to come out at the dark of the night and you're going to grab me.
So a lot of people don't know all the things that happen, but the Sanhedrin has no... so they have a problem. The Sanhedrin does. They can't kill people because the Romans are the rulers, and they are the only ones who can allow capital punishment.
Well, and two things. They can't do anything criminally either.
Correct.
All they can do is if the Sanhedrin finds someone violating their religious laws, they can punish them for that up to death because the Romans control death.
Yes.
And so it has to be religious, and it has to be not death.
Correct. And so we're not gonna go into the individual details of all this. We'll kind of run through it. But first off, the Sanhedrin takes them to the Sanhedrin. I mean, the priests and the servants, because the Jewish religious leaders had their own army. Essentially, they had a bunch of officers. It wasn't that great because the Romans wouldn't let them have a ton, but they had their own people with swords and stuff. So they took them to the Sanhedrin, which is the whole body of the religious leaders, to be judged by them.
So this is the middle of the night.
Yes. So remember, they walked like 10 plus miles. They had a nice dinner. Then they were in the garden. Jesus was praying. Jesus hasn't slept at all. And now he's drawn before the Sanhedrin.
Correct. And what do they ask him? The interesting things that they ask Jesus.
Let me see if I can find that while you talk about it.
Well, it's just they know the answers, and so what they ask, they're not trying to get answers.
They're trying to get him to self-incriminate.
Yeah, and it's we're almost there.
There we go. All right. There we go. So here we go. Before the Sanhedrin, So one thing, in Jewish law, you have to have at least 2 witnesses with testimonies that agree to convict anyone of anything.
2 men.
2 men, 2 men. Women don't matter.
Yes.
Because that was the cultural standard of the day. And so finally 2 came forward and declared, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." And then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is the testimony that these men are bringing against you?" I mean, what kind of...
And then he says, when he doesn't say anything, he says, "I charge you under the oath by the living God. Tell us if you're the Messiah, the Son of God."
And Jesus replies, it's the best. "You have said so. But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven."
Now, that's a direct quote of Daniel 7.
Yes.
Okay. As a side note here, the number 1 name that Jesus called himself was the Son of Man.
Yes.
In Daniel 7, there is a human that goes from earth to heaven, sits on the throne of God, and is worshipped.
Which would be Jesus.
Well,
it'd be God.
And it's God, because only God gets worshipped.
Yes.
And so this is a direct thing. If you notice, it says, "From now on, you'll see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Almighty and coming in the clouds of heaven." A direct reference to Daniel 7.
So, in a little bit more context, everyone in the Sanhedrin had the whole Old Testament memorized.
Pretty much.
Okay? So this isn't like us talking to some random stranger and saying this. He said this and they knew exactly where it came from.
Correct. And he knew exactly what he was claiming. He
Yes.
was claiming to be God.
Yes, he was.
And that's why they tore their clothes. And that's why they said he spoke blasphemy. And they said he's worthy of death.
Which they can't do anything about.
And they beat the living tar out of him.
They did.
Is what it comes down to.
Beating number 1. If you
Yes.
had a beating counter, this would be beating number 1.
Yep.
And then there's this interesting thing here about Peter disowned Jesus 3 times, and Jesus had prophesied to Peter that he was going to do so, and then he did, and then he felt real bad about it because his prophecy came true. He was like, "Oh crap!"
He did. He swore he would never do that.
Yes.
And then Judas hangs himself.
Yep. After going before the Sanhedrin.
Yep.
He hangs himself.
What they did to Jesus. He threw the money back and said, "Keep it," and he went and hung himself.
So this was still this was still Thursday into Friday morning.
Because Friday to the Jews doesn't start until sunrise. It's sunset to sunset.
Yes.
Correct?
I don't remember. That sounds right though.
It's sunset to sunset how they count days. So as soon as sunset hit, it switched to Friday.
Yep.
Okay, so it would have been Thursday to eat the meal, sunset somewhere around there, and it's now Friday, and they're now in the middle of the night, they're beating Jesus with their fists and sticks, and they're beating him.
And then they take him to the Romans.
Because they can't kill him.
They can't kill him, so they take him to the Romans. And then the Romans do this fun little charade with him. With the Jews are probably not happy about this, but so they take him to Pilate, which is the local governor of the area, and say, "Hey, we want to kill this guy." Essentially, I'm going to dumb it down because we'll get back to Pilate again. And then Pilate's like, "Why don't you take him to King Herod? He's your king." And so they take him over to King Herod.
And then Herod there's not a long story, but Herod was warned by his wife in the night, you shouldn't have anything to do with this.
Yep.
Because she had a dream and she don't. And so he he sends him back.
Yes, he goes to Herod. Herod asks him a bunch of questions. He doesn't answer anything.
So now Jesus has been beaten. Now he's dragged back and forth.
Yep. And now he's back in front of Pilate.
Correct. And so how many hours have passed? Nobody really knows.
But a lot.
But a lot.
A lot. So let's switch it over here so you can see what we're looking at here. And I can zoom in some. So then Pilate come here. Pilate calls the chief priests and the rulers and the people and says to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for charge against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death."
But his next sentence is a kicker.
"Therefore I will punish him and release him."
Yeah, he hasn't done anything, but I'll punish him and release him.
It was a ploy to try to make the Jews happy.
Yes, it was.
Because he didn't want rebellion and he didn't want a riot. He wanted everything to stay calm. And so he's like, "I'll punish him and release him." And I skipped this part, but during that, there's this tradition, and apparently it's this time every year, where the crowd can ask for, or Pilate allows the crowd to ask for someone to be released for free
from jail.
Yeah.
And so he gives them the choice.
He gave him a choice.
He gives them an actual insurrectionist, somebody who was actively caught trying to fight the Romans.
Yep.
And then they give him Jesus, who never fought the Romans.
Nope. Didn't do anything wrong.
And so they decided, give us Barabbas, not Jesus. And Pilate appealed to him again. So he kept trying to release Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept
yelling
crucify the crowd.
Him. Crucify him. Crucify him.
So he released. And somewhere we missed in here where they beat him.
Well, they're going to...
no, we missed it.
No, they beat him after, don't they?
They beat him after it? No, because he jumped to the crucifixion.
No, you're right.
So we meet.
Well, it is important to point out that his punishment was be whipped by the cat o' nine tails. How many times?
39 times.
39 times.
Because 40 times people died. So they would.
And it wasn't really 39 times. They just whipped him till he was almost dead.
Yes, that's.
And the thing.
Because that's what they did.
The thing you don't understand, because we live in a safe world. We live in a very safe world. The Roman soldiers killed people all the time. Because they whipped people all the time. They beat people all the time.
Or they could just kill them.
And they were experts at this practice.
And the guys who were doing the whipping knew exactly how many to give.
Yes.
And without killing them. Because they didn't want them dead. They just wanted them incapacitated for months.
Correct. And probably would die anyway.
And probably would die from infection, yeah. So it's a horrific thing. Cat o' nine tails, look it up. See what they did to him.
It's terrible.
And then Pilate then says, okay.
Yeah, we did skip around a little. So he brought him back up after this and said, okay.
Now what do you want?
Do you want Barabbas or this guy? And they're like, Barabbas. He's like, he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
No, we still want Barabbas. Kill him, please. So they keep on insisting and keep on insisting.
And then he agrees. It's as simple as it gets. Pilate says, okay.
Well, there's an important thing before that. He says, I wash my hands of this, which is a cop-out, yes.
It is.
But then what do the Jews say?
This will be on us and our children.
The blood of this man will be on us and our children.
Yeah. And that's
which is it's just, to me, is insane that you would say that, but it is what it is. So this is Friday now.
Yes. And
so
it's been Friday for a while.
Jesus hasn't slept since Thursday.
Since Thursday.
He walked all the way there from wherever it was before.
Yep.
Had dinner, was in the garden,
had an agonizing time in the garden.
then was grabbed and,
Beaten.
as you were well aware, if a group of individuals who have authority don't like you, they're not going to treat you nicely. So, yes, he was beaten with rods or sticks or whatever, but he was also just drug around roughly for hours and hours and hours.
And they mocked him. Every time they would take him between Pilate and Herod, when they did that, they would beat him and mock him. So when he was in front of Herod, they put a purple robe on him. They stick the
crown of
thorns on him. Okay, so the crown of thorns has horns.
Let's see if I can find a picture.
See if you can find a picture. Anywhere from, small to 3 inches, these thorns. They made a crown of it, put it on his head, and then they beat it with a stick into his head. So here's a picture you got to share.
Yeah. There's a bunch of pictures. But yeah, they were very long, and so they were sticking it into his skull.
Yeah, and they beat it into his head with a stick.
Yes.
And then they drag him back to Pilate. They beat him again. And then he decides, so he's been up at least 24, 30 hours.
Yeah, it's been a while.
He's been beaten now at least 3 times severely. And that doesn't count what the Jews beat him, how they beat him. I'm just talking about the punishments before Pilate twice and before Herod. And then they say, okay, we're going to crucify him.
Yep. So he says, okay, guys, you can go kill him, which is that's what they needed. They needed the okay to kill him. So they did. And so part of the process of that is they had him carry a cross, which was, 300 pounds?
It was a heavy piece of wood. It was absolutely a heavy piece of wood.
Up a hill to Golgotha.
And he dropped it.
Yep.
And they would kick him if he dropped it.
Yeah, well, I was talking to my son because our church did this Stages of the Cross, which is really cool. And I was reminding him to think about the smells. The blood, the snot, the probably piss, the
everything,
and then the dirt, and then people are spitting on him, cursing at him, saying all kinds of crap to him, and he's trying to drag this thing uphill.
Yeah, and he's been up and been beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten, which is why in the Old Testament it talks about you won't be able to recognize him as a man.
Nope, he would be so beaten that you wouldn't be able to, correct. His face would be so swollen you wouldn't be able to recognize him at all.
Yep. And so he drops it, and they grab some dude standing right there and say, carry it behind Jesus.
Hey, Simon, pick us up.
Yeah.
Because that's apparently his name.
Yeah.
And so he had to drag it up there for him.
And so he says some things that only somebody who had perspective outside of the thing you're in could say. One of the things he says in Luke 23:28 is, daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and your children. A time you'll come when you say, blessed are the childless woman, the wombs who never bore, the breasts that never nurse. And they will say to the mountains, fall on us, cover us. I mean, what a thing to say to these people that are following him. So he gets to Golgotha, the skull hill.
Yep. And they crucifies him. And just so you're aware, crucifixion was terrible, yes. But it was terrible because the way you died is you drowned to death. Suffocation. He would drown to death because he'd have blood, but you'd suffocate.
Yeah.
And what happened is they would, unlike literally almost all the TV shows show, the nails didn't go through here. They went through here.
Yeah.
Because your wrists would hold
off.
you up.
Yeah.
Not your palms. It'd just slip right out. Wouldn't feel good, but it'd come right out. And as we said before, the Romans were really good at their jobs at killing people. They've done this thousands of times, so they knew exactly what to do. And so they threw the nails in and put them up.
And that soft pedals what they did.
It does.
Because they put nails through your wrists, which is where the nerve bundles are.
Yes.
They put nails through your feet, where the nerve bundles are,
Yes.
on the board that's laying on the ground.
Yes.
Then they pick that board up and drop it in a frickin' hole.
Yep.
So all of a sudden you're in agony anyway, but then they pick you up and drop it so it jerks and tears.
Yep. And so the whole point was that your body weight pulled you down so you couldn't breathe.
Yep.
And you're hanging off your arms. And so to breathe, you had to push up on your feet that had a nail in it.
So you could take a breath.
And then you slump back down.
Yes.
And so this part right here, I think, is one of the most important things about Christian faith, following Jesus, because it contradicts a lot of what is taught in other religions, in Catholicism, all over the place, because it teaches what you need to be saved in the simplest, straight up point possible. What do I mean? Jesus was crucified, but he was not the only person crucified that day. There were 2 thieves who were crucified.
And they must have done not just thievery.
Well, it had been a lot.
They must have done probably murder during why they were thieving.
Yeah. Because
to be crucified, they didn't crucify guys. They just chopped your arm off if you were a thief, your hand. Yeah. So they must have done more.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus is put in the hole in the middle.
Yep.
These 2 are put on the outside of him, each one on each side. And a couple other things take place during this time. They cast lots for his cloak. Yep. He had a real nice cloak somebody had given him, made out of one piece of cloth. So they cast lots over it. And the other thing that was interesting that Pilate did as a poke in the eye to the Jews, he wrote a sign and put above in Arabic, Hebrew, and Greek.
Yeah.
This is Jesus, King of the Jews.
Yep.
And put that above Jesus on the pole he was on.
Yeah.
So, and then they mocked him. They yelled at him. The chief priests and they were mocking him. He saved others. He even healed others. He took care of others. Blah, blah, blah. He's the King of Israel. Come down from the cross, heal yourself, and we'll believe you. And he didn't.
Yeah. There's one part, and I want to find it. I can't remember. So it's the conversation between the 2 other guys crucified.
No, you're not far enough yet. There you go.
Maybe it's in... So I'll just go over it quickly, but one of the thieves looks over at Jesus and says essentially what everyone was mocking him about. If you're the king, if you're God, why don't you just get us down from the cross? You can save us, right?
He said, save us too. Which is, you can do it. Save us.
Yeah, you might as well.
If you're
right?
what you say you are.
And Jesus didn't say anything to him.
Keep going.
That was right.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Okay, this might be it right here. No, but this would be a good one to just continue on anyway.
Here, I'll search for it.
So we're still in Friday, by the way. And
I probably scrolled past it.
He's now on the cross. Luke
23:39. Oh, I wasn't far enough.
Yeah.
There you go. The one criminal who hung there hurled insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself. Save us.
And us.
And us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God? He said, since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly for what we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. This is super important for everyone to know. What does it take to be saved?
Acknowledge who he is.
Do you have to get baptized?
No,
Do you have to work at a soup kitchen?
nothing.
Do you have to give lots of money? Because clearly he needed to get down from the cross and go get baptized and have his last rites. Oh, wait, no. He did nothing. He had no time, and Jesus saved him.
Yeah.
Because that is literally all it takes.
Yeah.
It's very important to get that. That is all it takes.
Correct. And he had...
It's not difficult.
And the guy had nothing to do with the salvation.
He said,
do
oh,
anything.
he's
you are.
God.
Yeah.
Please save me.
Yeah.
And Jesus said, yeah, I'll do that.
So about noon. This is about
So
noon sometime
this is
before.
what, 48 hours later?
It's
a long time.
So darkness came over. So from noon to 3 roughly, the sun stopped shining.
Before we hop on there, because
Uh-oh.
I want to get back to... Where is it? This one. Yeah, this one here. So, a quick biblical history lesson. There are 4 Gospels. They all have slightly different things. And it's not because they contradict. It's because 4 different people saw things from a different perspective and also wrote the books to a specific audience. And so it's not that they were leaving things out because they weren't important. They were leaving things, they put in what they thought was important for their audience and what they thought was important to them. And so each gospel has some slight differences, and they're all different and important for different reasons, and all 3 of them together do agree. So that said, in Mark, it says here, in afternoon when it was dark, Jesus said out loud, my God, why have you forsaken me? And to us, it's like, wow, that seems ridiculous. Why would he say that? Because isn't he God?
Yeah, would you say? But why?
But why? Well, it comes from Psalms 22:1, which I can pull up real quick. And in biblical times, not in biblical times,
In the Bible.
in the Bible, well, before there was a Bible, people didn't have chapters and verses.
Correct.
22:1.
You're on there.
Yeah, wrong one. No,
Yeah, so
I have to click
you're
on
at
it
21.
again.
Yeah, but just go.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
There we go. What does this say?
So what they would do to let you know the passage they were referencing, and that they didn't have to say the whole thing. They would just quote the first line. And so everyone in his audience knew exactly what he was talking about. He wasn't saying God's forsaking him. He was quoting Psalms 22. And it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I do not find rest. Yet you are enthroned as holy, the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. And you, our ancestors, put their trust, they trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame.
So
But
think-
I am a worm.
So think
I am
about
not
this
a
for
man.
a second. Just skip back.
Yeah.
Jesus is hanging on the cross. He's been there for a while.
Yes.
He's been beaten to a pulp.
Yes.
He says this, and the frame of mind of those people have to change. The Jews that are there have to change, including the Sanhedrin, anybody from the Sanhedrin.
Yep.
They're starting to think this, and they're like, this is David's psalm where he's crying out to the Lord saying, save me.
Yep.
Save me. What does this mean? And verse 8, he trusted the Lord, they say, let the Lord rescue him, let him deliver him, since he delights in him. So this whole thing would send them into this Psalm 22, and they would
remember, they have the whole Torah memorized.
And they would
have
to
the
pause.
Psalms memorized.
Yeah, and they'd have to pause and think. All right, back to what happens, because so switch back to where we were.
Yep.
So we have this saying he starts, and some people said, look, he's calling Elijah, he's doing these things, and they try to give him vinegar, and he says something right before he dies.
He says, and this is in Luke 23:46.
Well, but there's one other thing that this version doesn't include.
Switch over.
Yeah, so there it is right there. So in verse 30, he says, Jesus said, it is finished. So the word that is used there is tetelestai, which is when used in courts, it means a contract is complete, it is fulfilled, there's nothing more to do on it, it is done. And that's the word he chose to use, a single word he chose to use when he bowed his head and then he died.
Yep.
And this is what's interesting as well. If you notice, the two guys on either side of him didn't die.
No, it was just Jesus. This is normal. Normally, they just stayed up there for a while, like a good long while.
Yeah, they could, until they would suffocate.
And it could be like 6-10 hours.
It could be a lot longer than that, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
And so what's interesting, if you notice, this is the day of prep. So now we're moving in, we're Friday. Saturday is the Sabbath.
Yes.
So this is Friday. It's past 3 o'clock because we know that it was dark from noon to 3.
Yep.
So it's past 3 o'clock.
So we're heading into nighttime.
We're
probably at dusk.
Dusk is the Sabbath.
Oh, so you're like within hours.
You're within minutes of the Sabbath hitting, or within an hour or something. And so they have to do something.
Yeah. And so right here, it explains what normally happens. The Jews try to appease the Romans try to appease the Jews, and the Jews don't like dead bodies hanging on crosses on the Sabbath. And so what the Jews do to make the people die quicker is to break their legs, or the Romans. The Romans break their legs. And what that does is it makes it so you can't breathe anymore, and then you suffocate and die, and it's relatively quick.
Yep.
They didn't break Jesus' legs.
Because they went up there and poked him.
And remember, the Roman soldiers killed people all the time.
For a living.
They knew what a dead person looked like. They didn't have to go up there and check for a pulse or anything like that. They could look and be like, yeah, he's probably dead.
Well, they would probably say he's dead, but to guarantee it.
Oh, yeah, to guarantee it.
They broke the legs of the two, one on each side.
Yep.
They looked at him and they said, he's dead, but we're going to make sure he's dead.
And again, I'll reiterate, these are trained killers. They knew exactly how to do whatever they wanted to do. They knew where all the vital organs were. They knew exactly where to stab people to kill them. This is something that they did all the time. Correct. So this next part that they talk about wasn't some surprise that they accidentally got him right where they want. No, they knew exactly what they wanted to do.
Yes. And they stuck him in the rib cage and pierced his heart with a spear.
And blood and water flowed. What does that signify?
That he was dead.
And had been dead for a bit.
And had been dead for a bit.
Yep.
So they've got to do this before dusk. They've got to get his body down before dusk. So this may have, I mean, they could take him down pretty quick. But anyhow, so they had to do that. They fulfilled prophecies. You can look it up, all the prophecies, all of this fulfilled. Yeah. But this was Friday. This is what happened on Friday. How is this good?
Yeah. The person that the disciples thought was the Messiah, God, died.
Yeah. And how's this good? And then they bury him. So they have to take him down. They don't want, the Jews won't want him hanging there. So they have to take him down.
Let's go over one more thing.
Okay.
It's in one of these other verses, this part here. So I think this is important as well. When he died, when he gave up his last breath, there was a massive earthquake that scared the life out of everyone. And not only that, they made a point to point out that the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom.
Yeah. So what's the importance of it not tearing from bottom up, but tearing from top down?
God saying that that's not where he lives anymore.
Yeah, so here's the curtain from God's perspective being torn to man. And this curtain was a heavy curtain. It was something that
it was like 20 feet tall too.
Yeah, it was huge. And it was part of the ceremonial space to keep the Holy of Holies separate from the riffraff.
Humanity.
Yes. And all of a sudden, that curtain is just torn and open. Now, there's one other thing that if you go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So the tombs broke open now.
This is a weird thing.
And now, if you read this in context, it says bodies of many people who died were raised to rise. They came out of the tomb after Jesus' resurrection.
Yeah.
Okay. And appeared to many people. So this is kind of out of order of time.
Well, this is typical for storytelling.
Yes, it is. But it's out of order of time, so just pay attention to it. So the centurion and those with him guarding Jesus on the cross, because of all the people, they exclaimed something that the Jews were not willing to exclaim.
Surely he was the Son of God, which is equal to God. A lot of people in our culture were like, well, he's the Son, so he's not. No, that means he is God.
Yeah, it was a Jewish reference.
Yes.
So as the evening approached here in 57, Joseph of Arimathea came. He went to Pilate, said, look, let me take his body, get it off the tomb. Let's get it in there before the Sabbath starts. Yeah. And it's my family tomb. Let me go put him in there.
Yep. So that's where Friday ends.
And that's where
he's
got
prepared.
Him. He got him in there, rolled a big rock in front of the tomb,
and
put away.
Remember, again, these are soldiers who kill people all the time. They were placed in front of the tomb. And their punishment for not doing their jobs would be?
They would be killed. And probably their families.
Yes.
If they had them. Yeah, so it's pretty serious stuff.
Yes. And they sealed the tomb.
They sealed the tomb. That's Friday.
That is Friday. So what's good about Friday? I mean, we've talked for not quite an hour.
The Son of God died. How is that good? The hopes and the dreams of the Jewish people who believed in Jesus were dashed and torn.
All his disciples fled.
Yeah.
They all left him.
They were crushed.
They no longer believed in God.
Who he was.
In who he was.
Yeah.
They were no longer Christians, if you want to use that term.
And the Sanhedrin was so paranoid that something would happen with Jesus' body. They went and begged Pilate, put some guards there.
Yep.
So he did.
Yeah.
He said, sure. And so they went and they sealed the tomb.
Yes.
Put a seal on it so you could tell if the rock had been moved.
Yep.
And then they posted a guard.
Yeah.
And this guard, they stayed there Saturday, the Sabbath, because they're Romans. They can work on the Sabbath.
Yep. So he was there all through the night, all through the day Saturday, and all through the night into Sunday.
Correct. And then Sunday,
Sunday is the reason it's called Good Friday.
correct. Because if not, what happened on Friday, but because of what happened on Sunday. And the Christians called that the Lord's Day is because of exactly what happened on Sunday. We
Yep.
mentioned it a little bit ago. The tombs were opened. Jesus came out and shocked. The stone was rolled away. He shocked the guards.
We might have to do another episode about Easter
We should.
because that'll take a while. But
And we've already got an hour.
the whole point of it being Good Friday is it goes back to even what the Israelites used to do is they used to sacrifice the unblemished lamb to cover their sins.
Correct.
Jesus was the unblemished lamb. A lot of people use the analogy that Adam was supposed to be the first human and he wasn't supposed to sin. He did. So Jesus was the second Adam. Yes, he existed before Adam, but he came back to take Adam's place because he does two things when he dies and rises again. One, he covers our sin, but he reestablishes the authority of humanity to govern earth because Adam gave that up to the devil in the garden because he placed himself under him
So Good Friday is only good
with a
because
resurrection.
of Sunday.
Yep. It's the only reason it's good. But it is very, very, very good.
Yes. So on that note, I think we should end, and we can cover Easter maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe next time.
And
Yeah, we might change a little bit of our podcast reframe. We'll still continue to talk about whatever we feel like.
and we are blessed because of what Jesus did
Yes.
and what he did for us.
Yes.
So thank you for listening. If you have any comments, make comments.
Yeah. Like and subscribe.
Thank you so much.